Good afternoon and welcome to the Armchair Monologues. My name's Ben and I'll be your host. Today's subject is making and taking of offence. Now, offensive things used to be offensive to a majority, and that's what deemed them to be offensive. But we now live in a world that's quite polarised by woke ideology, racism, unchecked and unfiltered migration that's affected the US and Europe and the UK, and everyone is hypersensitive. The Democrat corrupt regime that's just ended has convinced by brainwashing so many Americans that Donald Trump is actually going to be a dictator on day one, which was taken completely out of context, because his actual words was, I'll be a dictator only on day one. And then on day two, it's making America great again. What he was talking about was signing executive orders. The Charlottesville hoax, the very fine people, made up by Biden. Project 25, made up by Harris and Biden. It does exist, but Donald Trump had nothing to do with it. He only found out about it because he'd been told he wrote it. And he immediately denounced it as not agreeing with the ideas and the principles of it. He's the closest to a centralist Republican there ever has been. And yet half the country knows that, and the other half is panicking. And there's dissenting in the Pentagon at that level of what Trump might do to use the military against his own people. When he's had the job before. He was advised to prosecute Hillary Clinton for fabricating the Russian dossier against him using the FBI to do it, which was completely illegal, completely unconstitutional, and would have landed her in prison. And he decided not to, against advice. So if you think he's going after people, and these people who are threatening to defend their cities with their lives, they weren't doing that when their cities were being overrun by migrants and the citizens were complaining about what the Democrat policies were doing to their cities. There was no fighting for their lives and their precious freedoms then. It just happens now. And America is trying to argue with itself. Half of it is trying to not accept what happened. But the popular vote of America cast Donald Trump as president, as did the entire electoral college. It's the biggest landslide Republican win since Ronald Reagan. And the change the world needed, because left-wing progressive policies do not make for a happy world. And I'm sorry, you can't say anything of substance without causing somebody some offence. And for some reason, the Western world has mollycoddled and cushioned our youth and also, our institutions from offence. Now, if 1% of the population is offended by what I say, well, I'll liken that to say, if 1% of the population has a cold, that doesn't mean I have a cold. That doesn't mean everyone that I'm speaking to has a cold. 1% of the population has a cold. So therefore, if my joke's not offensive to 99% of people, and I say a joke, or if I give my opinion, and it's not offensive to 99% of people, or 95% of people, or 90% of people, it's not an offensive thing. Some people find it offensive. And to say something is offensive, you have to say that in the first person. And I keep making this point with the kind of woke generation, is that their group identity thinking doesn't work, because to call somebody or a system or anything that doesn't hold a human inherent belief to be racist is impossible. And to say something's offensive is only as a personal statement. You can only say something is offensive to you. You cannot be offended on behalf of somebody else unless they have seen it and told you they were offended by it, in which case you can say, a friend of mine saw it and they're gay or trans or whatever, and they were offended by it. And you have every right to say that, but you still can't say it's offensive to the trans community because you haven't interviewed them all. You don't know they all find it offensive. You don't know the percentages. You don't have a clue. So the word offence is kind of been propagated by the idea that everybody needs to, punch up, not down, when a comedy is based on punching down, let's face it. And great comedians are brilliant at making the fun out of people. And yes, I mean, Ricky Gervais is perfect. He's made fun of every marginalised group. And that is very, very useful in comedy, because he's not particularly he doesn't care about individual rights and how people live their lives. It's just funny jokes and comedy. But what's not funny is this rhetoric that has been spread about Donald Trump, and that people have believed that he's going to come in and try and take over. Now, don't get me wrong, I've done a big piece on this. It's called Democratic Corruption. It's another part of the Armchair Monologues. And the Democrats were running a totalitarian state. You need three things to be totalitarian. You need control of your legal system to weaponize it against your political opponents, which they did. You need control of your spy agencies to spy and censor on your systems, which Mark Zuckerberg proved they did, and proved they hustled him into doing it as well in a 10,000-page document given to Congress. And the messaging has always been threat to democracy. He's a threat to democracy, existential threat. He's going to end the world. When he's already been president, the person who was much more likely to end the world was always going to be Kamala Harris. He will put the world back to right if people don't get in his way too much. Now, there are people who have to go. For example, Alejandro Mayorkas. He's been impeached by the Congress and the Senate. By definition, he should have been sacked by Biden. So, of course, he has to go. Merrick Garland, the same. He's due to be arrested, but he's current head of the DOJ, so he can't be arrested because they won't arrest him. After that, he has to go, and he probably does need to answer for his crimes. So probably just Christopher Wray, who's led an FBI which has been shown to be corrupt on the Hunter Biden and that sort of story. When they said it was Russian disinformation, they had it in their headquarters since 2015. So they knew it wasn't, but they said to the American people it was. And 51 nameless CIA contractors backed that up. And it was all fabricated lies. And everything, the enemy from within. He was talking about the very specific leadership and the people entrenched in the system, the Democrat system, which all of his voters wanted out of government because they are corrupt and they've been running corruptly, and they've been running assuming that they'll get a certain part of the vote, and then they just decided to go full on with their left progressive policies and ruined partially America. For 4 years, America has struggled more than it has ever struggled in a 4-year period before. Joe Biden's presidency goes down as the worst in history. He talks about his legacy. It's crap. But ultimately, he's not relevant. He'll go down as one of the worst presidents in history, if not the worst. He'll go down as a guy who had dementia but tried to cover it up, and everyone around him tried to cover it up with him. And the proof is in the pudding. Answer me this. Who's running the American government right now? So, if people find that dissenting voices to their own are offensive, then they've cut themselves off from the idea of being able to listen to alternative points of view. And a lot of people find alternative points of view now to be offensive. And having an alternative viewpoint, if you just surround yourself with people who have the same viewpoint as yours, your chance of growing as a person and developing is terrible. You're in an echo chamber of people who are guaranteed to agree with you. There's no life challenge in that. There's no skills developed in that. Nothing grows, nothing learns. People will be completely out of whack. But Jesus Christ, I mean, I'm going to say this to the world because there are great movements around the world. Qatar have kicked out all the terrorist leaders because they don't want to have them there while Trump's president. There have been loads of movements. The UN have prioritised buying American energy over Russia, even before Trump's gone in and started his big baby drill project. And the whole world is shifting, and it's shifting in a conservative way, and the left liberals can't handle that, and they see offence at every corner. But it was their job. It's their job in their minds. For someone who has the woke mind virus, the first thing they do is they put on their offence cap and they stroll through the internet trying to find something that they find offensive that they can then complain about. And the victimhood mentality, if you mix that with a drama triangle, you get a whole soup of people who are either more or less marginalised than each other, and it's a competition to who's most oppressed. But never is there any real movement to say, actually, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to move forward with my life, which is what should happen. I'm sorry, if you're any group in any country, okay, grow up. Seriously, grow up. Your group cannot be offended. This is not an entity that has the capability of being offended. You can be offended. Don't speak for your group. And don't think that your groups matter to the rest of us. They don't. They don't. The LGBT movement was going along brilliantly until they declassified gender dysphoria in 2019 as a mental health disorder. God knows why. There was no clinical research to suggest they should do that. They did that. WHO did it because it was becoming more fashionable. And the numbers went from 0.004% to 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on which country you look at, which is scientifically and biologically impossible. And the only thing is, install gender dysphoria by normalising queer theory and transgender story and teaching CRT, which is teaching hate, teaching who to hate, how to hate, why to hate them, and when to start hating them most. These things have poisoned a whole load of people, and they've made them so vulnerable to offence that their universities are offering them safe rooms and safe spaces with Legos and cupcakes and comfortable bouncy chairs. And oh my God, they're literally treating their adult university students like nursery kids. And it's their rooms, their safe space to recover from the election. You didn't do anything in the election. You got nothing to recover from. You shouldn't get a day off. Okay? I mean, if everyone else got a day off, great. But I think everyone else had to go to work. That's how the world works. I was absolutely thrilled with the result of the election. Did it stop me working? No. Did I get to do a victory lap? No, because there's more work to do. So I carried on. But it's great because I'm a conservative, I'm anti-woke, I'm in the majority. Sorry if that offends people who are woke, because you're in a minority. And we don't want wokeness in society. So it is going to be your responsibility to take responsibility for yourselves eventually. And you may need help with that if you've been brainwashed to a place where you're someone who we would consider psychologically to have what's called the woke mind virus, which is a complete delusion on reality. So in these long form discussions, I often need a sip. Trump is going to pass laws making it very difficult for people to change sex before 18. And he's going to pass laws making it very difficult for women to play in men's sports. Now, get it into your heads before you take offence that the rest of the world wants this. And that only a small percentage of people want the opposite. And some of them are making billions of it. I mean, the gender reassignment industry in America is a multi-billion-dollar industry. They don't want to give that money up. They want as many young people to be confused into taking puberty blockers and going through the treatment of cross-sex hormones and eventually transgender or gender-affirming care, which is a new name. Never used to be that. People who fought for trans rights, it was all about being male or female. That's what it was. And those were people who had gender dysphoria. It's a very rare condition, but some people in the groups will have it, but their interest won't be served by being part of the trans rights mania that's going on now, because the L's, the G's, the B's and the original T's are not behind that movement. They feel left out. Transgender people who fought for the right to be transgender are now getting more stigmatism, more transphobia than ever before, because of this new generation of what we call transmania, it's become elective and fashionable. And there are so many detransitions, and don't let anybody tell you differently than this, because the exact statistic of teenage suicide or suicide related to gender dysphoria and trans surgery is 2 years after successful surgery. It is at no point before. When the doctors tell children that the child will commit suicide if they're not given their way and changing sex, they are lying through their teeth, and they have the evidence that they know that. It's been shown in the Haas report in the UK and the WPATH report by Michael Schellenberger at environmentalsuccess.org that shows the whole industry to be experimental child butchery run by people who've lied about their qualifications and are experimenting on your children. Now, if you're part of that group and you get offended by what I say, that's good. I don't want you to take it easy. I don't want you to take it lightly. I want you to think about it. because not everybody wants to lose a family member to wokeism. I've lost one. Not an immediate, well, pretty immediate actually. Blood, male father bloodline, yes. But Elon Musk lost his son to it. And they do teach, one of the things they teach in gender affirming care is to get the parents out of the way, and they take parental rights away. And we've voted against that. In England, we've got Kemi Badenoch now running the Conservative Party. She's out. She's the first black leader, female leader of any major political party, and she's fantastic. She's dynamic, intelligent, strong, and she's very anti-woke. So that's going to be a big shift in England. You have the same thing in Europe. You have right-wing governments are gaining speed all the time, and left-wing ideas are failing and falling. And if you keep taking offence, and if you keep taking everything you hear from the media, literally the propaganda machine that was produced by the Democrats was quite unique in the way it managed to brainwash so many people to think that Trump was someone Hitler-esque, whereas he's nothing of the sort. He's got the only presidential record in the last 20 years with no wars. He's a guy who brought about peace. He started the Abraham Accords, and people say his only achievement, he ran the best economy in US history. You've got so many achievements, 50 great achievements, Donald Trump, easily. And yet people say his only achievement was to pass a tax thing which made it, tax cuts which helped rich people. And here's what America don't get, and here's what the world doesn't get. The top 1% are the ones who pay the tax. Okay, our governments cannot live without the top 1%. So of course they're going to get tax breaks. Now don't get offended, because if they didn't get tax breaks, the top 1% have options to go somewhere else and get tax breaks. And that's what they do. That's why you see companies relocate, because it's tax beneficial for them, which is what Donald Trump's doing, bringing people into America, cutting their corporate tax to 15%. It's now beneficial to move to America, but it might be beneficial for a UK company to move to America. So all of these things have to be taken into account. This world is far too sensitive, and so much clear and decisive action needs to be taken on the social, the geopolitical, and the world security side. We need to put our enemies back in their boxes without having a whole load of whimpering people at home talking about and just trying to disrupt the entire process. I am not unsympathetic to the plight of Gazans, but I am aware that over 75% of them believe Hamas did the right thing on October the 7th. So Israel are quite right not to allow them to come straight back into Gaza without some oversight and de-radicalization, which they've been prepared to give up to Egypt, and there is talks about that. They're not saying that they should run the Islamic population of Gaza. They're just saying somebody else should for now, because otherwise they're just releasing a whole load of terrorists who Iran will resupply, and they'll get a new Hamas under another name within 3 weeks. So why would they do that? And we wouldn't do that. America wouldn't do that. No European country would allow it. So why are we pushing Israel to allow these things? Children who think you know politics and geopolitics, you realise that the woke uprising, the pro-Palestine protesting has pushed our enemies to align, all four, the axis of evil. North Korea, Iran, China, Russia are now aligned in their goals to end Western democracies. Now, we don't like that. The top 5 donators to our higher education systems are Qatar, the UAE, which is part of Qatar, but separated out because Qatar has donated so much more, billions more, far more billions more. Its first donation was 7.2 billion, just to give you an idea. That was the first one in 2002. Then we have China. Then we have Saudi Arabia. Now, they're not exactly their allies, but you never know what the Saudis are up to. They've got so many crown princes. One of them can go off the deep end and then just be retired to a palace. So, and then you've got Iran, number 5. And guess what? The local governments come in number 6 or 7. Not local governments, the governments of those countries. So England, yeah, we come in 6th. In America, 7th. So these people are accepting donations with conditions, especially on speakers they allow on campus. And they've taught Marxism, and they've kind of installed this kinship from white middle class people with the people of Gaza and the Islamists who propagate hatred and jihad, and they've all come together in a hating squad. Internally, ultimately, they hate themselves. And that's what the whole protest is about. They hate themselves, they hate the state of the world, they can't bear to look at it, and they don't want to try and live in it before they make a decision. And that's the first time that's ever happened. You have to learn to live in the world before you can think about changing it. And I would really, anyone who is in that Gen Z woke mode, I would really think, take that to heart. You need to live in the world before you can think of changing it. Because you can take offense to everything that everybody's going to do, but they'll still get it done. And all you'll do is be unhappy and miserable. You need to work a way to make peace with what's going on in the world, to make peace with the fact that you were wrong. The US referendum was the world's referendum on wokeism, and wokeism lost. And woke ideologies will no longer be part of the plans moving forward, which gives Europe and UK exactly the same opportunity to make the same mandates. Because America, whatever you think, and anyone in Europe, we have our elected leaders. America is our overarching, you'd almost say empirical force, except they're not an empire. But there's no arguing with America. They're the biggest economy in the world. They're the biggest military might in the world. We can't defend ourselves. We've got attack capabilities only in Europe. But so any serious war, we can't defend ourselves. If the Americans don't defend us, we'll lose, and they can take us out. Simple as that. So drop your offence. Go on the offensive. Try and actually make something good happen. I mean, Christ, I don't know how these people have protested for a year about something and not gone and tried to help it on the ground. Now, I went to a slum and lived for 2 years trying to help people there, and I get fed up with these little middle-class brats shouting intifada, pro-Hamas, spray-painting monuments, acting like hooligans and thugs, deranged semi-psychopaths. They're brainwashed to actually act like psychopaths, but it's not a fake fait accompli, so to speak. It's not a final thing. You can be de-brainwashed. It just needs non-affirmation of the views of the wokeness or any trans views. If someone uses pronouns, you do not use them back, but you do not insult them either. So you would use pet names, or you would use innocular words like mate or my friend or something else, but you would never use the pronouns, because if you affirm the identity crisis that they're having, they'll keep having it. If you stop affirming it, eventually they'll stop having it. And all research prior to 2019 showed that with the right mental health and the right explanation of the surgery, its complications and its risks, that 85% or more in all studies worldwide for 35 years showed that 85% or more people stayed in their own bodies and were entered predominantly same-sex relationships, so they were gay. Now, who cares? Who cares what sexuality you are? Nobody does. There will be bigots in this world. In every country, there will be bigots, unfortunately. That's an individually held belief, and so is offence. You can only take offence to something you take personally offensive. So if I've personally offended you, I probably meant to, but I haven't offended the rest of the world alongside you. And I haven't offended the person next to you necessarily. You need to ask them that before you can say that. And if you're in a comfort bubble, probably I have. But if you're actually sitting in a cinema and you were to watch this would actually be common sense to most of the people in the cinema. And the people who got upset would actually be kicked out of the cinema. That's how it would work. We've let wokeness go on too long. We've been too tolerant, and we've allowed them to be outraged and offensive and tried to placate it and epitomise in Europe with what I can only call as the Trans Olympics. That statue of the Last Supper, just making fun of billions of Catholics and Christians around the world in the most grotesque display they could imagine, with a French revolutionary and somebody with a severed head to show that we don't care about your Catholic, Christian, whatever it is, colonialist society. We only care about being queer and being here to stay and being revolutionary. No, go home. You lost your revolution because it was based on nothing but absolute garbage. Queer theory is rubbish. It's made up Marxist rubbish. And it makes people act like absolute nut jobs who take offence to everything, but they just look for it. And I'll give you one example. There's a guy called Jeffrey Marsh who dresses up, trans woman with a bulge, obviously, because none of them actually, well, few have the guts to go through the surgery. They just want to identify differently. But he makes a thing of setting up his TikTok, so eating in a restaurant, waiting to get misgendered, and then making a complaint about it, saying how it's a dagger to the heart every time. And he's got a couple of people sacked for it. And the question you'd ask is, why is he making dinner reservations on his own and setting up his TikTok camera? And then this happens every time. Why? Because that's what he intends to happen. He wants to be misgendered because he wants to make a big fuss of himself, because he wants people to feel for him on TikTok, and he wants a bigger community and a bigger people who like him, and everything is topsy-turvy in that social media world, followers and likes and things. If you're producing crap like he does, and some of it is not sanitary, but his stuff he's posted is some of the worst I've seen. And I'll say his name, Jeffrey Marsh, simply because he's actually done damage to people's lives. So I think he deserves to get his comeuppance. But, why does the whole world need to know about your new gender idea or your new xenopronoun or neopronoun? None of the 79 new ones fit you, so you make up a set of your own. What's that about? Just stop. Just call yourself normal names. Go by and think what you like. That's the beauty of it. You can think what you like. And I guarantee you, people who are easily offended don't think very much. Because when I get offended, I think about that. I will think about it. I will work out where I might be wrong, where I might be right, where the other person may not have meant to say exactly what they said in the way that they said it. And I will often explain that to that person, which completely dissolves an argument. Okay, if you rise straight to offence because somebody says something you don't like, and a friend comes to your defence, and suddenly you get a group of people who are all offended by one person saying things they don't like, you then feel it's okay for you to attack that one person, whereas in fact there's 90% of us who are backing that one person up, and an attack on that one person has always been an attack on all of us, which is why the whole ideology was thrown out, and why the cancel culture, the taking of offence, is gone. It's gone, and get used to it, because the new common sense, logical approach to life is here to stay. We, as a mainstream Western world, as adult human beings who would easily out-protest you in terms of a show of force if it was needed, which it should not be. We are adult human beings who've lived a lot longer, have a lot more life experience, lived without any trans people in our school lives or growing up with it. Nobody I know had that. It just didn't exist, and it's not because it was suppressed, because then you'd see a litany of suicides which isn't there in historical data. It's because it was propagated into education, and it destroyed a lot of young minds. And I'm very sad that it's done that to a lot of young minds, and I will be part of a solution, and I will do some things on how to unbrainwash people who've gone right over the top with things. But you can't, if you've left the tap running and it's overflowed, you turn off the tap before you grab the mop. And I'm sorry, the tap is still on, so you still have to talk about turning off the tap. And I'll leave it there. But try and take things, and when you hear them, think about them logically. Think common sense, and just remember that your identity does not matter more than everybody else's lives and realities. And everyone has a different perspective of the world. And when I say everyone, I mean every 8 billion people on the world has a different thought mechanism and perspective than you do. So don't take offence so easily, because you're going to be offended all the time now, and it's just going to cause so much division because of it. So try and bring yourself back to the centre, and there'll be people along the way to help you. You just need to make that one step. So I'll leave it there. It's good talking to you as always. I enjoy it. Hope you did too. Leave comments, please, and like and share and subscribe and all that good YouTube jazz. You be lucky, I'll be good, and I'll see you soon.